I feel like that leads us perfectly into the writing rope. I want to share this quote with you from Joan Sedita, the author of The Writing Rope, who said significant attention is paid to the multi-component nature of skilled writing, while writing tends to be referred to as a single monolithic skill. I'd like to suggest a model that identifies the multiple components that are necessary for skilled writing. A similar rope metaphor can be used to depict the many strands that contribute to fluent skilled writing. It should be noted that instruction for many skills that support writing also support reading comprehension. ReadWorks passages and question sets can be used in many different ways to supplement your already existing writing curriculum. And in today's webinar, I'm going to walk you through some examples. So let's start with opinion writing. On the screen right now, you see a screenshot. We have a product called News Debate Passages. And News Debate Passages introduce a topic and then present statements in support of and opposing that topic. These passages include vocabulary activities as well as question sets. You'll see from the screenshot, all you have to do is type in news debate into the search bar, and then you will have access to about 15 4th to 10th grade passages. You can ask your students to pick a side that's in the news debate article and have them extend the argument in their own words. So this is just one way that you can get your students writing more with an already existing ReadWorks product. What about narrative writing? So here you see a screenshot. It's really helpful that the content page on our website, if you're not familiar, I'll walk you through it in the demo. But there are lots of options in the filters, and I really want to show you ways to get the most out of using the search bar to find what you need. But let's say you're focusing on narrative writing in your writing unit. You can use those filters to locate fiction passages. You can have your students practice retelling events in those passages, following the format of first, next, then last. You can also have your students use graphic organizers with the passages in order to help them plan their own writing, right? They can draw inspiration from passages and then take it a step further and write their own narrative writing pieces. Also, for informational writing, using those filters, using the search bar can be really helpful. You can use the filters on the content page to search for nonfiction reading passages. You can have your students use graphic organizers to plan their own writing. Or you can have your students cite the passages in their own writing or find supporting facts that they can cite in their own writing. So really having them, use nonfiction passages on the site as sources for them to complete their informational writing activities. Perhaps you're using an existing writing curriculum that includes a mentor text, but you want more examples. Or maybe you want all of your students to have access to a mentor text. This was something that I did as a teacher. At the start of every writing unit, I would go onto ReadWorks on that content page and use the filters to find the right genre, and I would print out examples of that genre for students, and I would create a little booklet for them, and they would have it in their writing folders. So, for example, if it was a poetry unit, we have poetry on the website. We have some, so you can actually go ahead, filter by genre, and you can include different examples of poetry styles. This is also a really great way for your students to kind of guide themselves in the writing process. So, like I said before, you can print those examples out, or you can assign those mentor texts. And if you are assigning them, I would recommend adjusting the due date so that students are going to be able to have access to the mentor text for more than the default 2 weeks. And a benefit to using ReadWorks passages would just be, allowing students to refer back to these mentor texts rather than, having them constantly raising their hands or having to ask a friend. If they have a writing folder already with those mentor texts, they can take a look at some of the examples and they can, guide themselves in the process. You can also extend writing using your favorite ReadWorks product. So many of you are returning users. You are already using passages and question sets. You're using paired text. You're using all of that. You can actually use the products that you enjoy, but just simply make little changes to extend their writing. So I'm going to share some examples with you. And I just want to remind you again that you can access a copy of the slides that I'm using by clicking on the green button on the bottom labeled resources. So I know I'm moving through these slides pretty quickly, and there's lots of examples in here. So I just want to make sure you can take your time, follow along in the slides by clicking the green resources button. Okay, so starting with our passages and question sets. Number 4 and number 10 can easily be used for extended responses. If you're familiar with our question sets, you know that they follow a very consistent template. So number 4 is always going to be an inferential question, and it's a multiple choice question. But if you really want to get your students writing more, you can ask them to respond. You can have an open-ended response that way. Or just really extend their writing simply by assigning them, like having them just do number 4, but instead of selecting a multiple choice answer, they'd have to, write about it in their own words and cite examples from the text. We also have paired texts on the website. Numbers 5, 6, and 7 in the paired text question sets are another great way that you can extend responses. The first few questions in the paired text question sets focus on each text in that set, but numbers 5 to 7 really would allow students to compare and contrast the passages, and really encourage them to cite examples from each passage. So that's another great way to extend their writing. Okay. I just saw a comment that, so sorry to interrupt myself because I want to make sure. Yes, thank you so much, Celestina. So Maria, you should be able to access the resources by clicking on the link that Celestina just shared. Sorry about that. All right. Next up, we also have reading passages with open-ended question sets. So these are going to be passages that instead of having a set of multiple choice questions, really encouraging your students to write. And again, that big push to get them writing even more, complete sentences, citing facts learned from the article or citing the passage itself. So really getting them, writing or typing. We also, if you're familiar with Article a Day, there's a really great feature, the Book of Knowledge, where students, after reading that nonfiction article, are asked to write down some important facts that they've learned. We recently conducted a study this past spring where we learned that having students write daily Book of Knowledge entries that are 20 or more words actually support their gaining of new knowledge. So if you're already using Article a Day, that would be a really great way for you to extend it by, just setting that simple goal of you have to write at least 20 words. That's going to make that information that they're learning even stickier. They're going to remember it, and they're building that knowledge, which we know improves overall reading comprehension. We also have curricular alignments. And in my demo, I'll show you where to find all of that. But if you're using, for example, Amplify CKLA or Wit and Wisdom, right? You can use the alignments to extend the work you're already doing in those curricula by assigning passages, getting students to complete the question sets. You can have students, you can extend the question sets by having students write and not just focus on multiple choice. Teachers using ReadWorks passages with their existing curriculum really provides more opportunities to have students writing about texts. So I'm going to head into the demo, but I do want to take a moment and ask you in the chat, because I know I've named a lot of ways to get students writing. I'd love for you to take a moment, share in the chat something that you would like to try out this school year to get your students writing more. It could be something on the screen right now. It could be something that I've mentioned earlier in the presentation, but just take a moment, let me know what you plan on using to get your students writing more. Thank you, Denise. Article a day. Thank you, Christy. Yep. Using the paired text, it's a really great way to get students to compare and contrast. And really, you can push them to cite evidence. I'm seeing more folks saying article a day. The open-ended question sets with the reading passages. Thank you, Teresa. Tamora, news debate. Awesome. I'm so excited. Great. All right. So it sounds like we have a lot of folks who have a plan to get their students writing more. That's really exciting. Thank you so much for sharing. All right. I am going to have a little demo. I'm going to be looking over on the right side of my screen because I have another monitor here. So I'm still with you. If you don't already have an existing ReadWorks account, you can sign up for free. It takes less than 2 minutes. And like I mentioned before, you can use the content page because there are so many different filters and we have the search bar. So for example, under content type, you can find article a day sets. You can find those paired texts. So you could really use those question sets to get your students writing more on those paired texts. Under activity type, you can include the open-ended question set. So this really pushes them to write. You can filter by grade level. Another great way to filter is just through genre, right? So if you want some examples of mentor texts, using this genre filter is really helpful. You can use the nonfiction filter if you're having your students focus on informational writing, or the fiction filter for your narrative writing. So there's really like a lot of options here. Something else that I'd really like to point out to you, if you are using mentor texts, so the example I used, I said, this came in really handy in the poetry unit that I was doing. You can select multiple, poems, and when you go to assign them, the default setting when assigning a passage is 2 weeks. So if you decide to use mentor texts and you're not going to print them out, I would highly recommend just paying close attention to that due date, just so your students can, access that passage multiple times as they're working on their writing. I also want to just take a moment to show you the student view, right? So you can use the search bar. I'm sure, if you're familiar with ReadWorks, you've used the search bar to locate certain passages by topic, but students also have that same ability, and I'm going to show you how. Okay, so this is a student account, and they can click on library, and they can click on this search button. They have the option to select genre, or they can type in the topic that they're looking for. So let's say, for example, they're working on an informational text. They want to learn more about squirrels. And they can locate passages on that topic. So this is a really great way to encourage your students, especially if you're having them practice informational writing. Maybe they need to do a little research. You want to encourage them to find multiple passages that they can cite in their writing. They can use this feature as well. All right, I'm going to log back into the teacher account. And okay, here we go. I'm getting close to the end of my presentation today, and I want to make sure that I have time to answer your questions. So I'm going to head on over to the questions that have been posted here. Okay. Sorry, I couldn't understand that part. That is about 20 words. Can you explain it a little bit more? So the article a day resource, I'm just going to pull it up on the content page. Article a day includes the book of knowledge, where students are asked to write 2 or 3 things that they've learned. And we have noticed from the most recent study that we had this past spring that students were more likely to gain knowledge if they wrote at least 20 words in their book of knowledge entry. So really encourage your students to write complete sentences and really give detailed responses in what they've learned, and they're more likely to retain that information. So a great goal to have would be write at least 20 words when summarizing what you've learned. You could also extend the book of knowledge if you have time, simply by having students write maybe a paragraph. So those are just some ways to extend it. Thank you for that question. If a student answers something in the book of knowledge, are we able to see it? Yes. You can access the class book of knowledge by clicking on assignments and progress, and then you can click on book of knowledge. And from here, you can access their responses. Something I will say is once a student completes that book of knowledge entry, you can't reassign it and have them go back. So that's like a different feature. Are there audio features that can be paired with the texts? Yes, we include audio in all of our passages. I'm going to go to the content page, and I will show you an example. When you're assigning passages to students, you can select audio so they can also hear the passage. They can also adjust the speed. Thank you for that question. Okay. I don't see any additional questions, but let's say you think of a question later on. Here's my email address, tamika@readworks.org.